Kim, what's on your radar?
The second victim out of 4 scheduled to testify in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial took the stand yesterday, giving us more disturbing details as to how Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein recruited the girls and what they were asked to do. According to the Daily Beast, the victim with the alias Kate was 17 when she first met Maxwell and Epstein. She was originally listed by the prosecution as minor victim 3, but was renamed after the defense argued she was actually above the age of consent and thus could no longer be referred to in this way. The judge allowed her to continue to testify to show a pattern of behavior for Maxwell and Epstein, and what a pattern did she disclose? Kate, who is from London, described meeting Ghislaine in 1994 while on a trip to Paris. She was dating a man 18 years older than her who happened to be an Oxford classmate of Ghislaine Maxwell, and Maxwell befriended her and after a few weeks invited her to her home in London. Kate said she was excited to be friends with Maxwell. She looked up to her and admired how sophisticated and elegant she was. She confided in Ghislaine about her life, her mother's poor health, and her career ambitions. Maxwell told Kate she wanted to introduce her to her boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. She described him as a philanthropist who liked to help young people. Kate said Ghislaine did a lot of name dropping of her famous and powerful friends in order to entice her. All of this sounds like typical predator grooming: gain trust, entice with promises of an exciting or lavish lifestyle or career advancement. And after they gain that trust is when they begin to exploit. And that's exactly what it sounds like Ghislaine did, according to Kate's testimony. The Beast reports that the first time Kate met Epstein, Maxwell told him all sorts of flattering things about her, such as how she was smart and athletic and how despite her small frame, she was strong. Maxwell talked Kate into giving Epstein a foot massage just to show how strong her hands were. It was a few weeks later when Ghislaine called Kate, asking her for a favor, claiming Epstein's massage therapist canceled, and since Kate had such strong hands, could she fill in, even though she had absolutely no training? So Kate testified that when she arrived, Ghislaine led her to a robed Epstein in a massage room, gave her a bottle of oil, and shut the door. This is when Epstein engaged in sexual acts with her. When it was over, Ghislaine asked her if she had any fun and if it was any good. CNN reports Kate claims Ghislaine told her it was difficult to keep up with Epstein's sexual needs and that she was glad Kate was there. She even asked her at one point if she had any friends who could help satisfy Epstein's insatiable appetite. And Kate testified that she never recruited any other girls for Maxwell and Epstein. Kate testified that giving Epstein massages that turned sexual happened several other times until they flew her on a commercial airliners, not on Epstein's private jet, to Palm Beach, Florida. There, Kate describes a home with photos of nude young girls hung in nearly every room and a schoolgirl outfit laid out for her in a guest room for her to wear while serving Epstein his tea. New York Times reported that the defense tried to discredit the witness by asking her if she was seeking a special visa to live in the U.S. for helping with the case. Kate admitted that at one point she had, but isn't any longer. CNN also reports that the defense brought up the fact Kate had kept in contact with Epstein over the years, even while he was in prison in 2008. Epstein asked Kate to send photos of herself. She did not send the photos, but she did, however, sign an email saying, "Best, love Kate, love always Kate." She testified that she kept in contact with Epstein all the way until 2012, even seeking at one point to stay at his home in 2011, but didn't because he was out of town. Kate said keeping in contact with Epstein was a mix of denial and fear. So we're just learning more and more disgusting details about Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein through this trial. And this is the second of 4 that are set to testify. Again, not a lot of, she did kind of allude to some big names such as Prince Andrew and Donald Trump when she was talking about Ghislaine name dropping her celebrity friends and connections. But, again, we're not really hearing a lot of like bombshell testimony about some of these real prominent, powerful people that are involved in this scandal. But I mean, the picture is becoming really, really clear as to how Ghislaine helped recruit, gain the trust of these girls, try to get the girls to recruit other girls for her. I mean, just the whole thing is really, it just leaves you feeling icky, when you read the testimony of all of the what's going on.
And the detail that he asked for her photos while he was in prison. Can you imagine being in? That's almost darkly fun. It's not funny, but it's darkly funny. He's in prison for child sexual abuse, and he asked one of his former child people that he abused, please, I'm in jail for this. Please send photos. My God.
Right.
And so is the defense that Maxwell is trying to make here that these were of age young women, and
Well,
so therefore it was consensual sex work or consensual relationships, and so therefore she shouldn't be convicted? Is that like her out here?
Well, in regards to this particular witness, yes. So the defense did successfully argue that she was of age, she was of the age of consent, and therefore no crime had been committed. So the judge did instruct the jury to say, we're going to listen to her testimony for the pattern of behavior, but no crime was actually committed in this particular instance. So the defense is,
that's a pretty important detail.
Yes, right, yeah.
Right,
and
but she's only one. So what they need to find and present people who were underage.
Well, the first victim that they had testify was 14 at the time.
Right.
So she is facing charges in relation to that particular case. And then there's two more witnesses we have yet to hear from, and I believe they were also underage. Now this victim was underage. She just wasn't under the age of consent. She was still a 17-year-old girl when this began. So it's still,
Right, because some states are different, have different ages. Right, and so.
And this began in London, and in London, in England, she was of the age of consent at that time.
Right, and this is to show, because I guess it hasn't been terribly easy for the prosecution to find people willing to publicly testify about, the pattern of what their behavior was, and so. I understand. So the judge says, okay, this in particular is not a crime, but the jury can absorb from this details about how they interact, how they go about, and like you said, how they go about recruiting other people to be part of the circle.
How Ghislaine basically went about befriending and gaining trust, and then sort of introducing them to Epstein, and how that whole entire scenario happened.
Right.
So she was able to really, really describe that. There are a lot more victims other than these 4 that they're bringing in for this trial, but the others are being left out. I mean, there's plenty of high-profile victims that are not being involved at all in this trial. There's a lot of questions surrounding why is that? Is it because they lacked credibility, or is it they just did? Or what? Do they not want them to name drop on stand?
Well, a lot of them
are weird to have one testify who wasn't even. If you had other potential witnesses, shouldn't you put your most appalling cases of abuse?
Yeah, the thing is that they believed this victim was underage at the time. The defense successfully argued she was already on the witness list. And then the defense argued, well, actually, in the UK at the time, she was not underage. I mean, she was she was a minor, but she was still of the age of consent. So they successfully were able to argue that in court. And that is why now the judge says this is not part of the crime. This is part of the pattern.
And I think 2 other things are going on, too. One is that a lot of the victims, the crime was this was going on for decades. So this happened a long time ago. Statute of limitations is over. And 2, people who are abused like this often have their lives completely spiral out of control, which is one of the things that makes this crime so heinous, because it isn't just a crime that affects the person in the moment where they're victimized. It sends their life in a completely different direction, and a lot of people end up with all sorts of substance abuse to deal with the trauma, and then. Then defense attorneys use that substance abuse, which was the result of the crime, to undermine their credibility in prosecuting the crime, which is one of the fundamental injustices here.
And one really important thing I think to point out on this as well is that, the defense was trying to discredit her, saying, well, okay, this began in 1994. You maintained a relationship with Epstein all the way until 2012. If he was such an abusive monster, why did you do that? And I think it's important for people to understand that this is normal for victims, that victims often become very attached to their abusers. They believe their abusers love them. They believe that their abusers are looking out for their best interest. They believe they're abusers, and they're mentally abused, not just physically abused. And so I think that's another thing to point out, as these reports are coming out, how the defense is trying to discredit her in regards to that's actually a fairly normal thing for victims. We see this all the time with abused women. They're abused, they go back, they're abused, they go back, they leave, they go back, they leave, they go back. So this is, again, it just kind of shows how entrenched they were able to get into the lives of these victims and, kind of gain their trust and love.
Yeah, and it's important for abusers to understand that just because you've been able to gaslight somebody into temporarily forgiving you doesn't mean that you didn't commit a crime. Don't fool yourself.
Right.
You have to leave it there. Thanks, Kim. And we will have more Rising after this.